Summer is a perfect time for bass fishing, and in this episode, we're covering down on all things smallmouth and sharing some elite techniques to catch more and bigger smallies this time of year with some Bassmaster pros, as well as our current guide reports, cool product segment, and much more. This is Angling Buzz, brought to you by Omnia Fishing, a smarter tackle shopping experience. Today, our featured guest is one of the best smallmouth bass anglers in the game, Jeff Gustafson. He's going to share his insight into some of his favorite places to fish and what he likes to use to catch big smallies. Jeff, if you had to pick some of your top places in North America for smallmouth bass, which would they be?
Obviously, got to go with the home bodies of water that I grew up fishing, Lake of the Woods, Rainy Lake. You can fish shallow, deep, you got clear water, dirtier water. Learned a lot growing up on those lakes. Heading to the Great Lakes, some of the biggest smallmouths in the world, Lake Ontario, Lake Sturgeon Bay are probably a couple of my favorite places. And then obviously, can't leave out the Tennessee River down in, out in Knoxville. Had some success there the last few years. So those are some of my favorite smallmouth fisheries.
And if you had to pick a couple of your favorite baits and techniques, what would they be?
You know, obviously for me, fishing for a living, you kind of got to be able to do it all. So, you know, I'm constantly carrying a bunch of rods in the boat with me, and, you know, I'm doing some cranking, jerk baits, swim jigs, chatter baits. Obviously, hair jigs are really good in shallow water. The jerk shad on a jig head's one of my favorite ways to catch them. Ned rigs, tubes. Got to be able to do it all, and my favorite way to catch them is however the best way to catch them is.
Jeff, could you share some thoughts on the nature and personality of smallmouth bass?
So obviously every body of water has the fish have their own personality, but one of the #1 rules that I follow and that I sort of tell people is, you know, in the summertime, if you've got nice weather, it's sunny out, there's always going to be smallmouths up shallow. I think the crayfish get out and be active on the rocks a little bit more. They like the warmth. If it's cloudy, cool, windy, you're going to want to drop out and just maybe fish a little bit deeper, fish off the edge a little bit. And you know, every body of water is different, but if you follow that, you can usually always make contact with some smallmouths, you know, somewhere.
Jeff, for the Classic on the Tennessee River, your plan was to target smallmouth bass exclusively. What was your plan to catch them?
Yeah, so took a couple trophies home from the Tennessee River, and you know, been pretty fortunate there. And all of my fish have been caught on a Z-Man jerk shad, rigged up on a Smeltonator jig head, and that's a little bit of that's a downsized version. That's a 3.5-inch jerk shad, but you know, these come in a variety of sizes, 4-inch, 5-inch, I use them all. You know, try to match the bait to the size of the bait fish that you figure that the smallmouths are kind of focused on. But a few things with this bait, you know, it's the Elastec is stretchy and it's buoyant, and that really allows and promotes this bait staying horizontal in the water. So whether you're fishing it vertical over the side of the boat, watching it on your electronics, or you're using your forward sonar, and I'm doing a lot more pitching this bait out and swimming it over top of the fish to generate bites. But it's going to look more natural in the water. I think that's important. But yeah, this bait, you know, I've caught fish on it out on the Great Lakes, on Lake Champlain. You know, obviously for years around home, this is a primary technique that we use for northern smallmouths, and then obviously like down south on the Tennessee River works real well as well. So, you know, trust your electronics. I watch my bait constantly, whether I'm, again, fishing vertical or fishing it out in front of the boat. And the #1 rule, try to keep the bait above the fish at all times. Make them look up, make them work for it and swim up for it, and that's how you're going to get the most bites with a jerk shad rigged up on a jig head.
Hey, congratulations again on that huge win. What's up next for you in the way of events?
Yeah, so we've been on the road pretty steady since January, competing out on the Elite Series, all down south, and hasn't been my best season yet. Well, it has because of the Classic win, but we've got 3 events left on the Elite Series, all up north, all smallmouth events. We're hitting St. Clair, Lake Champlain, and the St. Lawrence River. So 3 of the best smallmouth fisheries in North America. I'm excited about it. And then I'm going to get to fish a few tournaments around home as well, the Canadian Bass Championship on Rainy Lake, number of other local tournaments. So summer's here, my favorite time of year, and I'm going to be doing lots of smallmouth fishing.
Thank you, Jeff, for your time and sharing some insight into smallmouth bass fishing. Good luck the rest of the season. Up next is our Timely Topics segment. We're going to be joining James Lindner with some finesse soft plastic techniques.
Ooh, 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 that's a better one there, I think. Ooh, ooh, wow, look at that guy there. Beautiful smallmouth bass. Boy, they're so cool. I really like those guys. Right now, it's midsummer. It's really prime time for doing this on deep water structures, and we're gonna talk about this, and it's really a gas for catching numbers of really big brownies. You know, when it comes to finesse bass fishing, I actually have a selection of baits here, 4 different baits that actually work wherever I've fished in North America for smallmouth bass. And the interesting thing is they're all relatively small profile baits, but the really key is, I guess, how they're fished in individual retrieves. This actually happens to be a VMC Ned rig jig with a 4.5 quarantine craw, which actually doubles as a really finesse craw, or a Ned rig in the fact that you can just pull the claws off. As far as a retrieve goes with this bait, it's relatively simple. It's usually a dragging and pumping. Every once in a while you can jig it really hard, but a lot of times you can actually just simply drag it on the bottom, and a lot of times you do a lot of dead sticking, and that's the really key, is not really to overfish the bait. And a lot of these times these fish are sitting on these spots, and a really fast, erratic behavior is not really key to trigger fish into biting. The second bait that we haven't caught any fish on, I guess Jeff threw it around a little bit, but is a small finesse swim bait. And I have this on a VMC hybrid swim bait jig. This is a 3.5 suicide shad. You'll notice that I got a really bright orange colored bait. We actually happen to be fishing in a dark water lake right now. And a lot of times we use natural colored baits, you know, like more minnow profiles, but in these dark water lakes, a lot of these bright color lures can be really hot. I know suicide shads come in like a pink color, a bright orange, more walleye-esque colors, but I can tell you at certain points in times I've done fabulous on big smallmouths with these baits. A guaranteed winner, no question about it. You have it tied on wherever you fish for smallmouth bass, spring, summer, or fall. It's the 2.5 Big Bite salt tube. And I actually have this interior weighted with a relatively heavy head in here. I think I actually have like a 3/8 ounce head in here. A lot of times you want an interior weighted bait. A lot of times we're fishing zebra mussels where you got a really erratic bottom. This interior weighted head actually bounces over the rocks and it minimizes the bait getting hung in the bottom. But it's a really fabulous bait. A lot of times we'll do an occasional rip, let it drag in the bottom, dead stick, slow drag. It's a guaranteed brown bass catcher no matter where brown bass swim in North America. Last but not least is what I've been catching a lot of the fish on today, which is a drop shot rig. This is a fabulous technique, especially because we've been doing a lot of sight fishing with our electronics with the Mega Live 2D sonar, where you see them, they come underneath the boat. You'll notice that they actually have a pretty long dropper, a tungsten weight, VMC tungsten weight. A lot of times what you want to do is run a longer leader when you get in these deeper water situations, and the fact that as you get on a sharper drop off or the bait's farther away from the boat, the bait gets lower to the bottom. So I actually need a little bit of a longer leader. I should actually retie this to about 4 or 5 more inches. And then I actually have a simple VMC Nico hook. This happens to be a Big Bite Somali worm. Fabulous fish catcher. This actually has a sensation. It's actually flavored bait or scented bait, and smallmouth really like this bait. I've caught a lot of fish on this bait since this thing has come out, no question about it. But this is when it comes to smallmouth bass, soft plastics and finesse is key for catching lots of big brownies throughout the summer months. Actually year round, to tell you the truth.
Well, one thing's for certain, small baits can catch big smallmouth bass.
Hey, it's Toby the Boy Blog with Leisure Outdoor Adventures, bringing you this week's AnglingBuzz fishing report for beautiful Leech Lake. And the fishing is been real good certain times of the day and slow other times of the day. So it still seems to be a slow bite. So bobbers and leeches and Lindy rigs with leeches. Still turning a lot of fish in the daytime periods here. Guys are catching smallmouth in that 8 to 10 foot range around the rocky points, and the muskies are starting to bite, open water, and shallows too. The muskies are going this week. Been several catches up here. And yeah, it's been fantastic fishing here on Leech Lake. It's still early summer patterns. Spinners, haven't heard a whole lot about spinners yet. I did see some people pulling them out on the Paris Trench on the edges where the bugs are hatching. So mayflies haven't completely done their business yet, so there's still some that are hatching. So those deep edges, 14 to 18 feet of water around the rocks, are a great place to start for walleyes. And in the Walker Bay sand and those type areas too. So spinners and crawlers, lindy rigs with leeches, and bobbers with leeches. So that's it. That's the report.
Thanks, Toby. Now let's head north to Lake Vermilion with Billy Rosner.
Getting into some really nice walleyes today. Out with a good friend and client, Rick, and these are just nice eating size fish. Gonna throw them back in the live well here quick. And how we're going about it, we're in a mayfly hatch right now. Today we're catching these fish shallow in like 4 to 6 feet of water off of some rock. And you can set up with slip bobbers and leeches and catch them too, but a really fun way to do it is we're just pitching plastics today. We're just fishing these 360, these storm swim baits, the boot tails, stowing them out, reeling them in slow, and they're just really whacking it. And these fish are they're just full of mayfly larvae, but they're just whacking these swim baits. So if you never tried that, try fishing some plastics, some artificials, and it's just a really fun way to catch them. It's like smallmouth bass fishing or something, and it's just a super good time doing that. Walleye bite's been good too on all your main lake structure, your reefs and humps. That stuff's all putting out fish. Live bait rigs with leeches now, half a crawler. Jigging wraps are really starting to fire up too, and hair jigs. So don't forget that. So have a great week and be safe out there.
Thanks, Billy. Now let's head to the Alexandria area with Joe Segura.
Well, a lot has changed in the past week. We have water temps near 75 degrees. So a lot of our predator fish are moving out of the weeds to that deeper weed edge, 16 to 21 foot of water. Sure, there are still going to be predator fish in the weeds where we were targeting spot on the spot where they really hold in a tight area in these little areas. But when they are on the outside weed edge, they move a lot more. So we have to use things like spinners, lindy rigs, and crankbaits on the outside to cover a lot of water because we have a lot of dead space between all those fish that are scattered along the edge. Just last night I saw schools of walleye and bass, maybe like 30 to 50. They would cruise down to about 30 foot of water, and then 5-10 would break off and come up to the weed edge and feed. And they did this all night long. So they're constantly moving and feeding on that outside edge. So using a technique that moves faster is the best approach. Sunfish still 3 to 16 foot of water, catching a lot of big bluegills, crappies. There's a ton of those around. They're right on the top edge of that 12 to 16 foot. So we're on the outside edge for the bass, walleye, northern. On the top edge is where we're going to get our crappies. So set down about 6 foot of water, and that's where all your crappies are going to be, right on that outside edge.
Thanks, Joe. Now let's jump over to Devil's Lake with Jason Mitchell.
The fishing's been good, and there's a lot of different things happening right now. Probably the biggest thing that we're noticing is the water's really clearing up in place, especially out on the main lake in East Bay and East Devil's Lake in particular. There's places where I can see down 6 to 9 feet, which is pretty clear for Devil's Lake standards. So that's required some adjustments. When you have wind, it seems like we can still catch fish shallow, but if there's not a lot of wind, we've been sliding out a little bit. So we either slip bobbering, bottom bulsers and spinners with leeches, or half a crawler have been really coming on strong here the last couple of weeks. And we've also been pulling crankbaits. If you can find stained water, obviously we'll catch fish shallow, or if there's wind, you'll catch fish shallower. We're still catching fish predominantly on main lake type structure, rock, weed combination spots where we're going to find fish less than 6 feet of water. But for the most part, these fish have slid out a little bit. We're kind of getting to that transition period here where that outside edge of the weed line is really where it's at. I mean, we're catching a lot of fish in those types of locations, road beds, or any type of rock that's in, say, 8 to 12, 15, 18 feet of water. We're finding walleyes.
Thanks, Jason. Now let's head over to Michigan with Captain Ron Dome Jr.
Hey guys, it's Captain Ron from Sportfish, Michigan, and this week I've got your AnglingBuzz report for the state of Michigan.
Get that belly.
Look at that thing. There's still some great smallmouth fishing going on right now. We're up shallow this morning throwing swim baits and spinner baits, catching some big pre-spawn fish. And as you head out to Lake Michigan, we've got a really good lake trout bite going. The water temps are really cold, and those fish are up high, fishing 10, 7 colors and higher, are producing the best bites. The king salmon are starting to show up pretty good too in Manistee, Ludington, as well as Frankfort. The Manitou Islands are also producing really nice catches of king salmon along with steelhead and lake trout mixed in. Be sure to get out this coming week and enjoy the great fishing we have.
Thanks, Ron. Now that wraps up this week's Buzz Bite Reports. Now it's time for cool products.
And now it's time for our cool products brought to you by Omnia Fishing. We're talking about smallmouth today, so we're going to start out with the Sensation Quarantine Craw from Big Bite Baits. You can see this is kind of a hybrid bait. It's a craw and a stick bait. This is great for Ned rigging. You know, pretty much any time of year, smallmouth will hit these dragging along the bottom. This is scent infused with Big Bite's new formula, a great size, some really great color patterns. This is perfect for Ned rigging, the Big Bite Baits Sensation Quarantine Craw. And next, a jig from Northland Tackle for Ned rigging. It's called the Nedster. You can see the design of the head is made for Ned rigging. This is kind of a unique design, perfect for dragging along the bottom. You have a bait keeper there, a Gamakatsu hook, and you can see this is a nice kind of strong and kind of light wire hook for an 1/8 ounce jig. This is great for finesse fishing, smallmouth bass, pretty much any time of year. This is the Nedster from Northland Tackle. And next from Rapala, the OG Tiny 4. This is a new take on their OG series. This features a circuit board lip. You can see this is a narrow crankbait. It's kind of a finesse style crankbait made of high quality balsa. I fished these a lot and have done really well for bass. Some really great color patterns on here, VMC hooks. This is a floating bait too, so it can ricochet off. You let it sit for a second, it'll float up. Really great action, kind of a tight finesse action to this. The Rapala OG Tiny 4. And next from Wavy Label, the Poppy sunglasses. Wavy Label offers an amazing lifetime warranty on their glasses. This is the smoked polycarbonate lens. They also have an amber lens as well. These are very comfortable, not only for eye protection and style, but also seeing into the water when you're sight fishing, enjoying your days out in the summer heat. You want to check these out from Wavy Label, the Poppy sunglasses. And lastly, from Blackfish, the Angler Sun Hoodie. The summer heat here in the upper Midwest can get pretty warm, especially when you factor in humidity, and that's why this hoodie from Blackfish can keep you dry and comfortable and protected from the sun. They have little pockets in here that helps wick away moisture, really lightweight. I'm wearing it here on set, but when you're out on the boat and you're fishing all day, this is just a really comfortable hoodie to keep you protected from the sun, the Angler Sun Hoodie from Blackfish. For these products and many more, you can shop online at omniafishing.com. And right now it's time for our Technique of the Week.
Hey everyone, Bob Downey here, Bassmaster Elite Series Pro. Today I'm going to talk to you about fishing a tube for smallmouth bass. It's one of my favorite things to do. There's a real particular setup that I like to use. The last couple years I've been using a 7-1 medium fast St. Croix Legend Tournament bass, and this is more on the medium heavy side, I would say, from a medium power standpoint. And I like a little bit stiffer rod when I'm throwing a tube for smallmouth. Your hook set is not necessarily like fishing a jig, but it's definitely a little heavier and you need to drive that hook in a little more. Smallmouth really tend to really clamp onto a tube to the point where sometimes they're just on the head of it and they don't actually get the hook. And so having a little bit stiffer rod allows you to drive that head past their lips a little and drive that hook into their mouth. So Legend Tournament medium 7-1 fast is a really good option for that. A couple of different ways I like to fish tubes for smallmouth. You can, cast it and drag it back, while having the boat sit in one spot. Another way is on the Great Lakes, just drifting the tube is a really big deal. Flip it out, let some line out and let the wing do the work and just kind of grid certain areas until you find the schools of fish. Lastly, I like to fish cracking a tube. You throw it out, let it hit bottom, and you crack the thing up off the bottom and it looks like a fleeing bait fish or a crayfish. So those are the three primary ones I like to use. I use a couple different sizes, that 3.5 inch size, and then your little micro sizes. If you're maybe up on shallow sand flats, throwing at individual fish, those micro ones can be a really good option as well. Choose your head size based on the depth of water you're fishing and the wind conditions for that day, and also your technique. If you're cracking a tube, you usually want a little bit heavier tube. It allows you to really snap that thing up off the bottom, and then it shoots back down a lot quicker. And that's where you're going to get your reaction strike when you're cracking a tube. So a 3/8 ounce, half, 3/4 when you're cracking a tube. For the other techniques, just base it on the depth and the wind of that given day.
Cool, and that was on the 2.5-inch salty tube.
For a reel and line, I really like a braid to a fluorocarbon leader, 10-pound braid to 10-pound fluorocarbon leader, and around a 3,000 size spinning reel. So that's my setup for tube fishing for smallmouth. Get yourself a 7 to a 7.3 length rod, medium, heavy, couple different size tubes, and that's really going to cover your bases and allow you to put a lot of fish in the boat, fishing tube for smallmouth.
St. Croix really has things dialed for their technique-specific rods. There's links below in the description for the products featured in today's show, as well as a link for our sweepstakes so you can win an awesome weekend up on Lake Vermilion. That's a big fish factory, including big smallmouth bass. You win a guided fishing trip with myself, all expenses paid, and a hand-selected tackle pack from Omnia Fishing. And we can help to avoid the spread of aquatic invasive species anytime you're leaving any body of water. Remember, clean, drain, dry. And if you have any comments or questions about today's show, let us know down below. And here's another video from AnglingBuzz.